Once again, thank you for turning out tonight and taking the time on this busy Monday evening. And I have to tell you what, science is a passion of mine, and I can tell science is a passion of the majority of the crowd here. Let me take you back to a year ago when I convened a committee, and that committee was based on me making calls to districts, schools, and not only educators, but I wanted higher ed on what they're doing to train the next generation of teachers. What are they doing currently? And that committee, which was also, besides the educators, the stakeholders, the INL scientists and engineers, the microns, the HPs, we had folks from all over. We had parents, patrons. So this was a broad committee, and it was geographically spread out also. I didn't choose just from our valley here. We had them from all over. So I had a really wonderful group of 15 folks that came in and passionately looked at the old standards, determined there was issues with those 20, 25-year-old standards, very vague, didn't help with the direction on where we want to go with the students. And the world has changed in 25 years. We now have a global market. It actually takes our students in Idaho to be competitive, not only nationally, but globally. And we want to maintain our Idaho students to be the next generation of employees in Idaho. I'm passionate about Idaho, and I want the students to. We have top-notch students. We need to retain them. It's difficult, and I speak about the competition. We're losing educators to surrounding states because of what they can offer as far as salary. And so it's like, well, what's the perk? Well, it's Idaho. But anyways, it brought me down from Montana. And I've been here now 25 years as an educator. I was in the classroom for 20, and I guess actually 27 years. And I've been at the State Department for 8 years. I am a parent. I have 5 children in the Idaho school system. And I can speak highly that they have come out with a great education, not just science, but general education. So 15 months ago, we started the call to come in and convene. We looked at old, we then went to the new. And is there guidance on new? Yes. There were 13 states last year at this time that had adopted new science standards. Based on what? Based on a lot of research. And that's what science is all about, research. Gathering empirical evidence. Not just something, a passion somebody has, a whim, but it's also all about peer review, great data. And in this day and age of, finding answers on Google and Wikipedia, it's like we can't base our decisions on items such as that. So the 15-member committee worked for 4 days. We had 2 different 2-day group meetings, roughly March and May. And then we put together a great set of standards that would help. And I have to go back to originally when I started teaching, Greenhorn out of Montana, and I was not provided any guidance. And so I had a textbook. Well, we need to be better than that. And so that's where we're at. We've got to have, and I'll say cookbook, but it's not a cookbook, because each teacher has their own method. Each student has their own method of learning. So we have to take that into account. Now, the 15-member committee, then we finally agreed upon a 110-page document of new standards. We call them the Idaho, and I'll call them the Draft Idaho 2015 Science Standards. They were all prepared. They went to the state board. They were approved unanimously by the state board last August, and then they went to the next level, which was legislation. Legislation says, well, it appears we need some more time. We need more people to measure in on this. And so that's where we're at. I'm looking for your submission of comments. Positive, negative. You're helping me. You're helping the state. And I don't want to take too much time here because we've got and it's like I'm getting a commission from all of you science folks. No, actually, I wish, but it's like I'm glad you're here to speak toward it. But we'll have to hold it to 3 minutes. And please, if you don't have time to say what you want to say, definitely go online and submit it online. I am reconvening the science committee here in a month to take a look at those comments and go from there before we go to the state board once again and then legislation. I think there's a question right there.
I'm looking at this three-ring binder. It says amended standards. They look a lot like the next generation science standard. Is there any serious differences between the next generation science standards and these new ones?
You see a similarity there, and there is good reason for that. First off, the next generation science standards, which have been adopted by 18 states now, have a rhyme and reason to them. First off, they spiral. Science has common threads, specifically nature science. How do you do science? And so we work from there. Before, our standards were fragmented. The poor children would then go to the next level of science, and it had nothing to build off of from the prior science. So now we need to spiral it and make it uniform and consistent. So yes, you did recognize that it looks a lot like the NGSS, Next Generation Science Standards. We make it user-friendly. We color-code it. They've got the 3 different tiers of information, and that's a good observation on your point.
So no major differences?
I would say that the Idaho committee put in their Idaho wants and needs based on next gen. So I wouldn't say next gen. Rather, I went back further, and the committee went back further to the frameworks of science, which was put together by the National Research Council, and used those. Good question.
Okay, first up we have Kelly Shute. Kelly? Myla Would.
Oh, holy cow. I know I was like the last person to sign up. Oh my gosh, okay.
Would you like me to come back to you?
Nope, I'm
Okay.
good, I'm right here.
All right, perfect.
I'm on it. So,
Hold
I
on.
come as a parent.
State your name again and your stakeholder group.
Myla Would, and I'm a parent. I addressed my specific concerns with the standards in my comments, which I'll just give you a copy for you to keep. The specific concern I addressed is the adding of theories such as human-caused global warming and Big Bang into Idaho law as if they are settled science, then using those theories to grade my child and my school and my teacher. I wanted to ask about a real-life scenario regarding a dissenting view to what is being proposed as settled science in the science standards. Example, if my son is asked to do a lesson on human-caused global climate change, he says he refuses to do that assignment because he doesn't believe it to be an accurate theory. Does my son get an alternate assignment? Does he get flagged for remediation? What exactly happens to his college and career-ready status? What about his P-TECH badging? Will that be negatively affected? Will workforce track, will he be placed in or not be eligible for due to dissenting opinion? I ask because I am concerned over the data exhaust my child would generate with his dissent. Knowing that as a parent I have no access to my child's full data backpack, I would be even more concerned if the one-on-one laptop is the sole entity that is assessing and remediating my child in real time. An algorithm, not a human teacher, an algorithm beyond the reach of the governor's task force, the unelected state board, local control, beyond the reach of parents being able to read or look at the actual assignments, assessments, or the curriculum. Secondly, where is the evidence the adoption of these standards ensure us anything but yet another expensive ed experiment? When were they piloted? I am concerned as many states actually had higher than these standards to begin with, as was stated in the original Fordham study. I believe Idaho can do better. Lastly, I would like to ask about actual cost. What is it going to cost Idaho taxpayers? How much money will escape the classroom and teachers yet again and be funneled into private pockets? Where can I see a total breakdown of teacher trainings, curriculum, technology upgrades that you have discussed and placed on spreadsheets to analyze? Also, how much money are we getting or did we get from the feds to commit to the science standards? And how does that relate to what our out-of-pocket costs are? Are the federal shackles worth the shekels?
Thank you. Scott, do you have any response right now?
Yes. First thing I'd like to say is the feds were not involved with this. And we didn't want to make the same mistake that happened with Common Core, which, yes, the feds were giving some rebates to states to come up with. Science I don't want to be dictated by somebody in D.C. I want it to be our own. And science should be, and I'll say, grounded on that empirical evidence. Now, as a parent, and me as a parent, I choose what kind of setting my student goes into. That's the nice thing about Idaho is we have choice. We have magnets, we have charters, we have publics, we have private. And so if there is something, and local control will provide an opportunity for that student that may excel at a different environment. And so I'm sorry, I can see you grimacing, and I know that you're passionate about it. But in the interest of time, I'll say that we will take your comment and look at it in a month as a committee.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, Sharon Cates.
I'm Sharon Cates. I come with two hats. One hat is as a teacher in the Boise School District, and the second hat is as a biotech research scientist. Before I was a teacher, I was a scientist. And our current standards are not conducive to allowing students to do science. Students learn best. I've learned as a teacher that students learn best when they do. And our old standards are that mile wide, inch deep, and they don't get an opportunity to master anything. It's difficult to teach the entire standard because you get 1 day per objective. And it's impossible to help a child understand the detail involved in a single standard in a single day by just telling them or having them do a worksheet. Students need to do. Our new standards require that students do. And they also point out those relationships between the different fields. I have a degree in material science and engineering and a degree in molecular virology. You might think those have absolutely nothing to do with each other. In my professional life, I developed chemical methods of getting DNA into eukaryotic cells and getting those cells to create proteins. It required the knowledge that I gained in both areas, my knowledge of materials as well as my knowledge of gene transfer and how a virus infects a cell. So I feel very strongly that it's important that our students are given the opportunity to see the relationships between different fields, and these cross-cutting concepts really make that visible to both students and teachers and make it a requirement. In addition, the practices give teachers something to hold on to because it's very difficult as a teacher to know how to help students do science. We have a book. So the practices help our students do the science and thus become scientists. They gather their data, they analyze their data, and they come to conclusions which they communicate back out. That is the key to science, and that's why I support our new revised standards, because it brings in those pieces that were missing before. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can respond to Shannon's belief on these new standards being a better product. And that is, yes, the content is the same, the delivery is different. It is pretty much performance-based, where the student then demonstrates their knowledge rather than just regurgitates the knowledge.
All right, next we have Bob Compton. Bob, state your name and where you're from.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get back a little bit.
Okay, I'm Bob Compton. Can you hear me back there? And I'm from Midvale, Idaho. I'm a veterinarian. I also have a PhD from University of Wisconsin-Madison in physiology. I've taught most of my life. I left university teaching when political correctness got too strong for me. I was a tenured associate professor at that time. But I've continued to teach, and I'm still teaching today. I believe a lot of what you're saying about standards is probably an improvement. Three of us here at this table, we were in on the Goals 2000 Standards for Excellence, started back in 1998, and those were going to be the end all. And now and those were national standards also. And now they get rated as a flunk, an F. And we predicted that. There was no pilot study or anything done on those. I think people will talk about that issue. What I want to talk about is a fundamental flaw in these standards. I was on the review committee. I tried to mention it there, but that was too big of a change for them to address. And I went to the State Department and went to State Board, and they couldn't address it, didn't want to address it. And they said I had to go to state legislature, which we did, and here we are again. So the NGSS framework and its missing assumptions. The NGSS and its framework are based upon the foundational assumptions of materialism, naturalism. Hereinafter I'll refer to it as materialism. These assumptions are: one, that only mass and energy interact in space over vast periods of time, that's called deep time, and that random interaction of matter is self-organizing over these vast periods of time. It's produced everything we encounter today, including ourselves. If these assumptions are true, then cosmic, chemical, and biological evolution are sound logical deductions, and the NGSS and framework are scientifically justified.
30 seconds.
Pardon me?
You have 30 seconds left.
Oh, thank you.
No, you have 30 seconds. Keep going. Okay, thank you.
I would vote to let him continue because
Yes,
I'm
I
very
think we
interested in what
need
he
to
has
have
said.
continuity here.
What we can do, if we have time, we can come back to him.
Well, we were told when we came up the table, we'd have all the time we wanted tonight. And then you go back to the 3 minutes. And there's been people who have talked longer than 3 minutes, and I appreciate you
I've-
letting them talk.
I've
But
timed
I'm the one
everyone.
you chose to cut off. I don't
You had
appreciate
30
that.
seconds left. You could have kept going. I've just given
Well,
you a
30
time.
seconds, ma'am.
All right, well, let's move on then. We can come back to you, Bob, if you like. Tammy Nichols? All right, Tammy.
Start now?
Sure.
Okay. So first of all, my name is Tammy Nichols. I'm from Caldwell, Idaho. I have 5 children in the education system. I have a degree in general science, and I'm a taxpayer. I have gone through all the standards for the NGSS, or whatever you want to call them, Idaho or what have you. To me, they're one and the same. These proposed federal standards, being perpetuated under the guise of science, should be soundly rejected based upon common sense. In truth, many, if not all, of these standards are not based upon factual scientific methods, but only assumptions. Science, like math, is an exact application. These proposed standards are attempting to say that 2 + 2 = 5. Now, you and I know that that is not science. This is truly a form of science fiction. True science establishes indisputable facts based upon real evidence. Rather, these standards seek to infuse students with a particular political view regarding climate change, sustainability, renewable energy, and other environmental matters. The standards are one-sided in that they disproportionately focus on negative effects of human interaction with the environment. Many are not based upon scientific evidence, only theory. They promote several controversial issues, including evolution as fact and man-made global warming as a settled science. Also, these proposed standards do not teach the vital differences between scientific fact and scientific theory, particularly when presenting the teaching of evolution. Although an interesting concept, it is not a scientific fact and is clearly unconstitutional to teach according to the Idaho State Constitution. It is evident that many of these proposed standards were not established through the scientific method, which requires repeated tests and confirmation through observation and experimentation. How else would you arrive at such conclusions as found in the kindergarten standard, which teaches that animals need to take in food but plants do not? This would be news to the Idaho agriculture industry that knows that CO2 and various nutrients are food to plants, regardless of how some political groups regard CO2. Does Idaho believe that all or most human action leads to negative consequences for the earth, which are taught by these standards? Are these concepts a threat to Idaho's economy in that they teach our children that the industries of their fathers, such as agriculture, farming, forestry, and mining, which are essential to the economy of Idaho, are causing environmental damage and are thus to be avoided? These are dedicated and hardworking Idaho families and companies who are responsibly involved and make a living off of these commodities efficiently and without destroying the earth. Why is their side not presented in these standards? On the contrary, the unproven negative effects of such practices are presented throughout these standards. I oppose these proposed science standards specifically because they are not scientific. They lack quality, they oppose traditional Idaho values, they are a threat to the Idaho agriculture economy, and they are non-objective. I'm submitting additional documentation with my testimony, which I also sent to the committees of the Education Legislature, House and Senate departments. And I hope that you'll be able to answer some of my questions in regards to these.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want us to take that?
Bob, if we have time, we'll come back and give you more time. I want everybody to have a chance to speak. So diversity of opinion is a strength, not a weakness. We want everybody's voice heard, but we can't be here for midnight. We're certainly here to stay as long as we need to, so I'll be timing.
Yeah.
Okay,
all the
give a
time.
1 minute warning then to everybody.
Okay, usually I give 30, but I'll give one if you like. All right, Brent. I can't read your last name.
Yeah, Brent Carter.
All right.
I was going to use a
Go ahead,
sheet
state your
here.
name and.
But yeah,
where you're
just,
from.
okay, but
Do you wanna
I
come over here?
won't have time to do this. So I guess I'm going to speak from a cheat sheet here. My name is Brent Carter. I was Chief Geologist, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation for 25 years and Chief Diving Officer of Engineering-Oriented Underwater Inspection Teams for Evaluations of Problems. I'm a consulting engineering geologist now. I have 4 grandchildren in the Boise school system, and I do pay taxes. That was a good one you said. I do pay taxes. And so I would like to address ESS1, MS4, and other related standards which focus on the geologic column and time scale, asking the students to verify the 4.6 billion years. And if you look, I had an actual drawing to show you the geologic column, but you probably all have memorized that over the years. And there's 12 major primary layers, and each layer is actually given a name, a index fossil, and an ancient age in those layers. And this was invented in the early 1800s, mainly Europe. And so this situation was used, the inventors used the theory of uniformitarianism. The present is the key to the past. Everything is happening very slowly now. It happened slowly in the past. The geologic column was arranged with the small things at the bottom, the simple things at the bottom, the complex, bigger things at the top, of which man ended up at the top too. So it was small, simple, complex at the actual top, and this essentially shows the aspect of the evolutionary time scale, the Darwinism, evolutionary, or naturalism. What does actually show? So I don't know how much
You have
time.
1 minute left.
Oh, I have 1 minute left.
Well, you're-
Wow. Okay. So let me hit a couple of my bullets. I can only share a couple. For over 20 years now, dinosaurs such as Tyrannosaurus rex, the duck-billed dinosaur, and Triceratops have been found with soft tissue, blood vessels, bone cells, blood cells. There are over 40 cases of meat found in dinosaurs. Biochemical decay rates show that these creatures died only several thousand years ago, not millions of years ago. That shoots a big hole in the middle of the geologic column. Now in carbon-14 is found in dinosaur fossils, diamonds, oil, gas, coal, and having a half-life of only 5,370 years, carbon-14 should decay away within about 50,000 years. There should be no carbon-14. Diamonds are billions of years old.
Thank you, Brent.
And
That's
am I
time.
through? Okay, I'm not through, but I'm through. Thank you.
We'll come back to you if we have time at the end. Will Overgaard? I'm going to pass. You're going to pass? Okay. Yeah. Cathy Peter? Where you at? Okay.
I'll take my 3 minutes. All
right, good.
My urge is to say ditto to Shannon.
State your name and where you're from.
I'm Cathy Peter, and I live here in Boise, and I'm a retired hydrologist. I worked for 34 years for the U.S. Geological Survey, and I'm the most unlikely scientist as you could possibly imagine back in the 1960s when I was in junior high school. I was a girl. And my parents were not well educated. They both had dropped out of high school. I did not come from a scientific background or a well-educated background. But I had a teacher who pointed at me one day and said, "You're good with abstract ideas. You should be a scientist." And it never occurred to me. Well, I did go on and get a degree in geology and geologic engineering and worked as a scientist pardon?
That was good.
That was good. I worked I'm just pointing out how important the influence of teachers are. And I worked as a scientist, and supervised scientists, and hired scientists. And I know how important in this day and age, when science is changing so rapidly, it is that we have high standards for critical thinking and understanding for our students, not just for those students who may go on like I did to become a scientist, but those students that go on to be teachers and legislators and just good citizens, because the world is complex. And there are things that you have to understand in order to make the sound decisions that make this a healthy, happy society. And I think the standards contribute to that ability. So it is important that we maintain the standards, and I think the standards are quite accurate, frankly. When I read, I'd love to be back in school and learning the things that they emphasize. And I would refer to you, if I have a little more time.
You have 1 minute.
I have a minute. Well, then I'm going to provide a quote here from, speaking of climate change. This is a statement from the American Meteorological Society, which is a professional society that represents the meteorologists in the United States. And they made this statement in 2012. There is unequivocal evidence that Earth's lower atmosphere, ocean, and land surface are warming. Sea level is rising, and snow cover, mountain glaciers, and Arctic sea ice are shrinking. The dominant cause of the warming since the 1950s is human activities. These are the scientists that understand this topic better than anybody. So I think we do have some information here that supports the findings on climate change that are mentioned in the standards. So I hope we hear the last of that. Okay.
Thank you. Next up, we have Chris Taylor.
I'm Chris Taylor. I'm, again, the Social Studies Science Health Supervisor for the Boise District. And I was one of the 15 people on the committee with Bob as well, and I appreciate Bob's comments. So I'll be quick so Bob can have some more time. I'm very passionate about science education. I have a geoscience background, so I appreciate you talking about uniformitarianism. What I feel, being K-12 supervisor for my students and teachers, is there is more science going in our schools the last 2 years that we have piloted these standards in our district than I've ever seen in my 22 years in the Boise District. These standards are about kids doing science, being scientists, being engineers. I know we can get to the nitpicky about every little content thing, but if you look at the standards clearly, it is three-dimensional. We talk about the practices, and we talk about these cross-cutting concepts, and then we talk about the content. But getting students to be and act like scientists are the key of these standards. We want science-literate students. All the groups of companies, Micron, HP, I do some work for NASA in the summer, they want science literate students. That's what these standards are all about in my mind.
Thank you. Debbie, is it Donovan?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Michelle Youngquist.
Hi, I'm Michelle Youngquist, and I'm here in the other category. I provide professional development classes for teachers and others who work with youth, and I do that as part of my job at the Idaho Forest Products Commission as their education coordinator, and we have several programs, including one called Project Learning Tree. So we train teachers with hands-on, minds-on materials that they can use with their students that are all standards aligned and all help them to do what they need to do anyway. We've been doing this. Project Learning Tree is 40 years old now. The Forest Products Commission is 22 years old. We've been doing this for a long time, and no matter what the standards are, we're able to help teachers do what they need to do. The whole motto behind our program is teaching how to think, not what to think. It's helping students become good critical thinkers, be able to ask good questions, parse information, look at multiple viewpoints, understand and respect other viewpoints, be civil in their discussions, learn how to do all those different C's, all the things that people need today. I'm a citizen also of this town, of this state, of this country, of this world. I want people from Idaho to be able to be members of the entire world. I think the new proposed standards help them to do that. It helps them to be able to understand things whether they agree with them or not. It helps them to find good information that they can use if they don't agree with something. Then they can be educated and come up with an argument of their own. So I would just like to come out strongly in support of the proposed next science standards. I've watched the many years of development at the national level and then watched the careful work that Idaho has done to try to fit whatever it needs into the wonderful guidelines that were provided at the national level. And it's been a grassroots sort of thing. It's not from the national level. It's been several states working from the ground up to do this. So I feel like it's just helping Idaho compete if we provide them with this framework. And I agree with what Chris said. I see teachers less frightened of science. I see them more able to do science because they've got this. I'd also like to say that environmental education, which is what I train teachers in, is by nature interdisciplinary. So I'm a fan of thinking about all these different things, the cross-cutting concepts in the science, being able to write and speak, communicate about science with all the other disciplines is very, very important. And I feel like these standards are the closest we've ever had to helping students and the teachers who teach them to be able to do that. Thanks.
Thank you. Cindy Thorngreen.
Hi, I'm Cindy Thorngren. I'm here in multiple roles tonight as a parent with a kid whose favorite subject is advanced placement physics. Not sure why. My dad has a former biology teacher in the district that might have an influence on his science background. I'm a substitute teacher for the Boise district. I run my own little nonprofit called STEM Idaho, so STEM everything good. And I'm also running for House, for a seat in the House right now. And if this comes up, and if I happen to be elected, which I'm not in an area which probably that will happen, but if it does, I will definitely support these new science standards. I think it's something that kids need to look at science as learning about. We don't know what everything is. A scientist makes theories. A scientist makes a thing, and then they experiment, and that's all about science, and that's what we're going to be. That's what we teach kids in school: is what is your theory? Can you design an experiment that proves or disproves it? And that's what we want to teach kids, is how to do that, because that's what we need them to do once they get up and get into jobs. So my main thing is, yay, go for it. Let's get it passed.
Thank you. Dale Keys.
Thanks. I'm Dale Keys. I came here mostly to learn what all the hoopla is about. The email that I received was that at the last minute of this legislature that a small group of people came in and sneaked some stuff under the radar to change these standards. I was horrified this year to read in our newspaper that we have a committee chairman who is proud to say that he bases his climate votes on what Rush Limbaugh has to say. That just strikes fear in me that he's so proud of that. I come from a long line of Baptists. My grandfather was a Baptist deacon. My dad is a devout Christian. He balances his faith with some common sense. He does not believe this earth is 10,000 years old. He believes it's billions and millions of years old. He takes the National Geographic. He and I never did see eye to eye on religion as I was growing up. But my biggest concern is that to whatever extent the changes in this curriculum are being made for non-scientific reasons, that is a huge concern to me. It is 2016. It is not 1916. It is not 1816. I'm concerned how any of these changes could hold up in court and end up costing us a ton of taxpayer money to fight these things. The legislature squeaks these things through, and then it sees the light of day, and we turn around, and just like our Comcast budget, all that stuff that gets done under the radar, then when it sees the light of day, here come the lawyers, and the taxpayers pay for it. Are there any members of the press here? I saw you taking a picture, and I hope that that there was going to be a member of the press here. There's no legislators here. None of the people who pushed these changes through are here. But I'm here to learn what these changes were, and I'm here to learn what the motives were of the people who want them changed. I love to. I have friends on both sides of this issue. I have a dear friend who's a Rush Limbaugh fan, so and he and I love to go at it. But seeing these changes come through and so few people knowing about this, I just happened to get this email about this, and when I forwarded it to my friends, they were concerned as well. They're not here, but that's where I guess that's where I'm done.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So you can tell your friends that we do take the written comments and we have online submissions for them that they like. Okay. Jenna Ray.
My name is Jenna Ray. I teach science at Garden Valley High School, which is about 15 miles north of here in the middle of the Boise forest. I teach science in an incredibly conservative district. I teach evolution in an incredibly conservative district. I teach about the evidence that we have for climate change and what's causing it in an incredibly conservative district. These standards are what we have current data on, and that's what science is based on, is the data we have. Science always holds, when you get a bunch of scientists together and you'll be like, are you certain about something? And they'll be like, I'm 95% certain. And for a scientist, that's certain. But they always hold out, well, there could be more evidence. And what we have currently, all the evidence points to what the standards say. And that's why we're going with that. And if someday in the future we get a whole bunch of new evidence, we'll revise the standards. So that's specifically on the evolution and the climate change, which I know is a reason why the legislature kind of said we want more comment. I've never had I've had students come into my class going, we disagree with evolution, we disagree with climate change, are you going to make us learn it? And when we actually sit down and talk about it, I have yet to have a student leave my classroom really disagreeing with it. And they still retain their faith. I have deeply, deeply religious students. And when you present what's going on, they go, oh, well, that doesn't threaten my religion at all. So I think there is kind of openness for dialogue. And teachers do that.
1 minute.
1 minute, thank you. So that's that point. And then, as a teacher, I actually use next generation science standards in my classroom. I teach 6 different classes, which means I have 6 separate preps that I have to do, which for a teacher is really intense. And I'm new. This is my 2nd year teaching. And the Idaho standards are worthless for a new teacher trying to figure out what to teach, how to teach it, what to do. So I started going to the next generation science standards because I could actually use those to create curriculum for my students. I talk about cross-cutting concepts and they go, oh, that makes sense. And then they apply it to English or to history or to their Spanish class. I use it to explain why we're doing certain things, why I have them read graphs, why I don't just tell them what this data set means, but I have them look at the data set and they're like, oh, you're preparing me for actually doing something once I leave high school. You don't want me to just memorize, regurgitate, forget.
That's time.
Thank you. So I support these standards.
Thank you. Patricia Reno?
Well, I guess was a parent.
State your name. Oh, okay.
I'm Patricia Reno. I live in Boise. I was a parent of 2 students in the Boise School District. One of them was just there. I support this new standards. I think we have to move forward with each generation. I produced, or the school system that they came from helped make 2 scientists. My son is in Hawaii as a CEO of sustainable energy projects. But I think it's really important for teachers to have a source of material that they can develop instructions on and that are clear enough that they can go forward with. And I don't think you should ever be afraid or concerned about new information and theories of how the world works. And I think students will question their teachers always. And I think having standards is a good thing, and I support them.
Thank you. Greg Stone?
Greg Stone, I'm a science teacher at Inspire Connections Academy, a statewide online school. It's got its own district, it's a charter school. I received a webmail just yesterday saying that Idaho's elected officials recently rejected science standards that included old Earth, evolution, and climate change. And there's yeah, I'm going to skip that. I'm a big fan of the next generation science standards. I believe, in addition to the Natural Resources Council, is that right? Natural Resources Council. They were created after the Common Core standards, and there's 10 Common Core standards for literacy in social studies and science, and there's a really good one in there that's about evaluating the credibility of your sources. Big fan of the next generation science standards as well as the Common Core standards. The Common Core standards were not something that the federal government forced down the throat, as a lot of people say whenever they say Common Core standards. They were developed by the National Governors Association. The national governors got together and initiated the new the Common Core standards, and I especially like that one of evaluating standards. These next generation science standards are more about process and not about facts. You use facts, and a scientific theory is always going to be a scientific theory. And there's a huge difference between a scientific theory and the layman's definition of the word theory. So there's not going to be a fact of anthropogenic climate change. Don't worry about it. There's not going to be a fact of evolution by means of natural selection. It's always going to be a scientific theory, and it's going to evolve just like evolution has occurred. And I think that Idaho should really teach its children to be skeptical and to evaluate their sources. The reason that's really important is GMOs are being hated by a lot of people right now, and agriculture is the industry of Idaho. There's a GMO called golden rice that can save lives in Southeast Asia. They've genetically modified the rice to include vitamin A that prevents blindness and death from vitamin A deficiency. And it's being prevented from being applied to these students these young kids in third world countries because of fear of GMOs, fear of science in countries like this and in Europe.
Thank you.
Sorry.
John Robinson?
Well, thank you very much, and thanks everyone for coming out tonight. I'm here as a parent. I have two 5-year-old girls named Kate and Leela, and I'm here because I support the Idaho content standards as approved by the Idaho State Board of Education, and thank you for holding these hearings. Kate loves animals. She loves dinosaurs. She loves fossils. She loves taking care of animals. And I'm looking forward to teaching her about Idaho's natural heritage and about earth sciences and even about evolution and the theory and the evidence for that as we've come to know so far. So I support the science standards for evolution as proposed here. Leela loves stargazing. She loves constellations. She wants to be an astronaut. She asked me if I've been to the moon myself. I had to disappoint her. But she wants to learn about the wonders of the universe. She wants to learn about the Big Bang and what we know and what we don't know. And this is what science is all about. It's exploring what we don't know, challenging our assumptions. And I support the way that our assumptions are challenged in the standards, saying, here's what we know. Here's the best so far. If you know more, use a scientific method. Come out. So I support the standards for the Big Bang, history of the solar system, age of the Earth. How can she be an astronaut if she doesn't understand the history of the solar system? Leela was also born with one kidney. And so she has a condition. And I would like her to be able to understand how to take care of herself and her own condition. In fact, maybe even how to help take care of others. To do that, she needs to learn anatomy, molecular biology, genetics. So I support the Idaho standards for science that include genetics and evolution as a part of that. And it's the best we know so far.
A minute.
And just in closing, I want them to be competitive. Yes, we're all talking about Idaho being competitive, but I want them to be community members. I want them to be constructive members of society. To do so, they have to understand and listen to each other, listen to other people. And part of this means understanding how science works and how to engage in it. So I want them to be able to understand the issues about chemistry, atmospheric chemistry, climate change, if they're going to actually be good stewards for both their communities and Idaho's natural heritage. So thank you, and I support the standards.
Thank you. That was the last person that we had actually signed up to. Oh, we got another one? Okay, hold on.
Leslie Atkins.
All right, Leslie Atkins, Elliot.
Thanks. My husband came just in time to watch my baby. My Kate, actually. My name is Leslie Atkins Elliott. I'm faculty at Boise State in Education. My PhD is in physics. I often tell my students at the very beginning of the year that to be alive right now and not get a chance to study physics is being alive in the time of Shakespeare and not getting to see his plays. I believe it is our greatest cultural achievement. And I also tell them I hope your English teacher thinks that that's our greatest cultural achievement. I hope chemistry agrees that chemistry is theirs. But for me, when I was 16 and I was set on being a music major, never taking science again, I took an AP physics class, and it changed my life, my understanding of the universe, my ability to feel like I can understand the world around me, and it made me really feel empowered as a STEM major, as a woman, someone whose parents were not scientific at all. And so I really want to say thank you to this table of teachers over here for taking time out to come. That really is phenomenal. I also was a high school teacher. I also have now done my postdoc in education, and I'm working at Boise State in the I Do Teach program, preparing future teachers. I've seen the standards over the years, the standards when we first revised them to include inquiry as a standard, to say that the process of science is just as important that students learn as the content of science. What we learned after kind of some false starts with that was that teachers kind of on Friday would do their inquiry day, and that we didn't teach the content as emerging from the practices of science. We didn't teach that science comes about by engaging in a community with other people, with other ideas, with all of the disciplines and evidence on the table, and coming to a conclusion. And so students, when they had these facts and they weren't sure where they came from, they fell back on this rote learning, and it didn't make them very competitive in the marketplace, but it also didn't give them a sense of how do we know these incredible things that we know about the world? How do we know? So if you don't know about the gravitational wave experiment that just happened, you should read about it. It's the most phenomenal. Like to be alive right now and that's happening in your backyard in America. I mean, we live in the country that did that work. We, as a country, produced the scientists with our research funding. To do that work, you should really participate in that part of your cultural heritage. And it's important for me as a parent, as a teacher of teachers, to really bring students into this really rich cultural heritage that we have in science. That's not to say that there aren't many other wonderful parts of our cultural heritage. I hope people take great pride in agriculture. I hope they take great pride in the incredible things that this ability to do this gravitational wave has to do with mining and the minerals we were able to get to make the computers that we have. So there are many different parts of our culture that we should all be learning about and embracing. But science is one of them. Very excited about the next generation science standards. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, now that's the last person I think we have signed up. Is there anybody that didn't sign up that wanted to speak on the science standards? Okay, Scott, do you want to reply to anything, and then we'll go to the other ones to further comment?
I'll conclude that I appreciate all of your passions. Pro, con, it doesn't matter. That's what it takes. A good discussion, good dialogue. And that's what my committee did a year ago, and that's where we'll be here in the next month. And so we need your information. So please post it, please share it. So thank you for being here.
Okay, so we had two people that had additional comments, and we'll come back to you, and you can further the rest of your comments.
Okay, Bob Compton, in case you forgot. A great deal of observable scientific evidence accumulating over the last several decades have refuted the basic assumptions of materialism. Making matters even worse, the framework in the NGSS never mention, let alone stress these assumptions. They jump to the conclusions, which leave the teachers and students believing it is all scientific fact. There is no transparency here. The opaqueness is black. And the NGSS and its framework violate U.S. and Idaho laws. The teaching in public schools of materialism is prohibited by both the U.S. and Idaho constitutions. The Supreme Court of the United States has defined religion inclusively, meaning that it not only includes theistic worldviews, but also atheistic worldviews. This definition of religion includes attempts to answer ultimate human questions such as, where did I come from? Materialistic evolution says pond scum or fish. Why am I here? Materialistic evolution says I have no ultimate purpose. Where do I go when I die? Materialist evolution says back to dust and oblivion. Idaho Statute 33-1603 prohibits the teaching of sectarian doctrine. Besides theistic doctrines, the term sectarian also includes atheistic, materialistic doctrines that are expressed by humanists, Marxists, Darwinists, and neo-Darwinists, and so on. It is important to note that John Dewey, a reformer of national education, was also a signatory of the first Humanist Manifesto and the first president of the American Humanist Association. The conclusion is that the NGSS and its framework are founded upon religious assumptions that violate the U.S. and Idaho constitutions as well as Idaho Statute 33-1603. Why would we ever consider such biased standards for Idaho's public education program? There is a way around this. We do have to teach science. I love science. I've lived science all my life. And standards are good, but we're only teaching one side. We don't have the balance.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, do you have further comments, too?
Yes, I'd like to have Mr. Compton, so you'll see his pleasant face again. He will stand up and show this geologic time scale. Why don't you just walk back here, Bob?
All right, state your name again, please.
Yeah, Brent Carter, engineering geologist. Okay, so here is the geologic time scale right here. Simple things at the bottom, complex things and man are at the top. And index fossils were utilized to determine the age of the layers. Well, how were the layers defined by age? Well, it was the index fossils that were found in the layers. Well, that's called circular reasoning. That's not science, that's circular reasoning. That's what this was developed on, was that type. I just wanted to get through. We have to talk awfully fast. If we scientifically look at the geologic column, remembering that science is based on observation, testing, repeatability. That's the scientific method. Observation, testing, repeatability. And so I would just gently hit these two bullets which I had, and that was, I think all of you have heard about the meat that has been found in over 40 dinosaurs now. And biodegradable, you know, the biochemical decay rates for meat is just several thousand years. Well, the dinosaurs are in the middle of the column here. They became extinct 65 million years ago, and they came about 130 million years ago. Well, if they're only thousands of years old, that kind of puts a big hole in that column, the time scale. And then this aspect of carbon-14 is probably more well known than any other of the dating methods. Carbon-14 has a half-life of 5,730 years. Carbon-14 is found in the dinosaur bones. It's found in the actual diamonds, which are primarily carbon, which are billions of years old. That's at the very bottom of the time scale here. And then it's found in the middle, just underneath your dinosaurs, in the coal and the gas and the oil deposits. So carbon-14 having that life of 5,730 years by about 50,000 years, all the evidence of carbon-14 should be gone. It shouldn't be present, but it's found. It's actually found. So that concerns me about this when, and then I kind of had a closing statement here. Our future and our children's futures will depend on us knowing our true origins. Our true origins. There are essentially two time scales used in the world for determining age of past happenings. The evolutionary Darwinism, millions and billions of years chronology, and the biblical chronology of thousands of years. Our schools need to expose our children and my grandchildren to both time scales to allow them to utilize a scientific method to explore their validity. So I'm just trying to challenge these standards to share both timescales and then look at it from the scientific method standpoint. Observation, testing, repeatability. That's our standard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Were there any other questions or comments about the actual standards?
So throughout the whole evening, I was hoping
Hold on.
that I would find out what are the motives behind the
Hold on, let me get back to you.
what are the motives? Do we know the motives of the people who showed up at the legislature and proposed these changes to the standards? What are the motives? Is there an elephant in the room that we're not talking about, or?
The legislature, the State Department of Education created standards because we have teachers like this who were not able to teach with the standards that we had. Our standards are not up to par. They're not based on what a lot of people are doing. Don't have a lot of science to them. So the State Department has proposed new standards. What happened is when those standards then went in front of the legislature said, oh, we didn't have enough input, put it back out. So the legislature has stopped us from going forward.
But the legislature.
So I'm going to have Scott address this. So he'll.
My understanding is that the legislature stopped because a small number of people showed up and expressed a problem with this on religious grounds. That's what I'm just working from the email that I got from the organization that sent it to me, and that is my concern.
All right, Scott.
What happened was we went through the review process. We brought in educators, as we described earlier, and those changes that you see on the tables now in those documents went forward to the ed committees and the legislature, and they said, without changing anything, they said, we want more public comment. So they didn't do a rewrite of anything, but they also did not pass them forward, and they did not entertain debate. So there really was no debate at the legislature, and there were no changes. But they said, we want you to go out for public comment, and we will review them the next time they work their way through the Board of Ed and back to the legislature.
So where did the specifics of taking out discussions of the Big Bang Theory, evolution, and climate change, where did those discussions come from in the email that I got from the Idaho Conservation Voters website?
I would say the best way for you to find out what happened was to go back and look at the Idaho Ed News report from that legislative session, because it gives a great rundown of what happened, and so that's your best way forward, to see exactly how that transpired.
So I think I'm
Hold on.
saying the same thing that he's saying.
State your
Did these proposed standards come before the legislature and they could have had a chance to approve them this year, but they decided to postpone them for 1 year?
Correct, 100%.
Okay.
Please state your name and.
My name is Daryl Ford. I'm sorry I didn't get the dress code email. My name is Daryl Ford. I am a retired quality assurance specialist from General Electric Space Systems Division, and we were hired by NASA to support Rockwell International in shuttle orbiter checkout in Palmdale, California. And before I got to work on that fabulous project, I made space hardware. I worked for a valve company, and I've got things floating in space all over the place on Venus, following Halley's Comet. And I also got to work on the space suits that they go outside of the shuttle on. They're called EVA suits. And one thing I noticed when we were looking at the standards for science, in the very beginning of it, they're going to teach little kids climate change. Well, whenever something happens with the climate, and they say that there's something that's climate change, NASA, who gets all the data for these things, says this isn't true. So I don't know how you get it together when they keep coming back and saying it isn't true. It's kind of like the spotted owl in the Pacific Northwest. It turned out to be a hoax. There turned out to be another owl that was eating those owls. Okay, and they said it was the forest industry that was causing it. But we need to get an overall thing going on when you're teaching kids. And I don't think evolution is it, because Darwin and Lyell said they were going to discredit the church by stretching out time, by making it look like the church is wrong. And you need to look at that too. I mean, he's got a letter. You can read the letter, you can Google it. But you need to take more time. Global warming, I don't believe is true. The whole Atlantic Ocean dropped 5 degrees in temperature, 5 degrees, the whole ocean, okay? And storms like Katrina stopped happening, okay? Right after Katrina, the whole ocean dropped 5 degrees. NASA will tell you that. What do they call them? The global warmingists, or whatever you call them. say that it's climate change, because they can't call it global warming anymore. And what happened to those scientists that got stuck in the ice last year up in Antarctica? I mean, shouldn't they have known that was going to happen?
Total nonsense.
So, anyway, thank you for listening. That's my opinion. But I think we need more into this than what's there. The kids need to know more than just Darwinism and evolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Oops, sorry. All right, looks like we have one more that wants to testify. Erin McKinnon.
Ready to introduce myself anyway?
Yes, please.
My name is Aaron McKinnon. I am a science teacher at South Junior High in Boise. I'm also past president of the Idaho Science Teachers Association. And I helped write the state standards 15, 16 years ago for science and physical science, and have done so with the Boise School District twice. And so I have a couple degrees from Boise State. That's where I had my education. And I love Palmdale. It's a sweet spot. Enjoyed NASA 2 years ago there. It was really cool. So I teach science. I love teaching science. I'm a person who follows the aspect of Vygotsky. If you're into any psychology and education, you got a zone of proximal development. You got this stuff right here. We're going to teach you what's just outside and stretch you a little bit. And I think that the standards that are now in place are more factual based and not enough to say, here's all this extra stuff. Here's where we can stretch you. And here are all these ideas that can take you all these other neat places. And so the standards that have some titles and stuff. I'm not sure if we're supposed to say them here, but I've worked with some of the national standards and things, and seen the cross-cutting concepts and those ideas that allow a student to go those places. And if we give teachers the freedom to follow those standards and that protocol of just saying, hey guys, let's go explore and experiment and find out, I think we'll see a lot of growth. And right now, I can teach the facts, and I just wrote the curriculum for the online class for IDLA, the state-sponsored high school, and I'm going through that process right now for physical science. And I called them up and I said, which standards are we using? And they said, we have to use the state standards. And I said, great, thanks, that's what I needed to know. I could be done with it in about 2 weeks, because that's how shallow they are. And so we can't do that, of course, as a professional. And so instead of teaching those essential facts, which are there and so shallow, I go a lot deeper and say, here's a question, here's an idea, here's something to think about within physical science, all those neat things that we get to discover and explore, which I think are important and essential, but they're not in the state standards now. If I'm going to teach about energy, there's about 6 or 7 things that are essential that I have to teach, but they're not listed in the state standards. And so I think the freedom of having a little bit more of here's a general idea and a neat idea of way to get there and explore and have the kids discover it isn't outlined in today's current standards, and it's encouraged and allowed and accepted and pushed a little bit more. So the pedagogy and the methodology of the standards that I think should be accepted for that part of it. So there are some facts in there that are questionable. I agree with that, and that's part of science, is to question, is to look at, and may or may not agree, which is perfectly fine. But I think the pedagogy, the methodologies, the encouraging of learning is an important part that is more addressed in the standards that should be accepted. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think we had a great conversation tonight. We heard a lot of different sides of the issue, especially in the science issue. We are going to stay around for a few minutes if you want to speak to any of us individually about the standards or about any of the rules that are presented here tonight. If you have any further questions about the process or anything else, you can certainly ask that as well. We thank you for your comments. We thank you for your time. And again, we'll take those into consideration. And again, this is a first step of the process, and this will take a year long. You'll have several times in the future that you can comment as well. Thank you very much for coming.